My name's Linda, just an ordinary girl who ended up serving drinks at Joe's bar downtown after high school. It wasn't anything special, but it paid the bills and kept me occupied. That's where I first saw Daniel. It was a Thursday night, the kind where the bar was lively but not too crowded, just how I liked it. Daniel walked in with a few friends. He stood out, not because he was loud, but because he had a relaxed, easy smile and a look in his eyes that hinted he knew something you didn't. He strolled over to the bar and sat right in front of me. "Hey," he said, flashing a grin. "What's good here besides the view?" I gave him a look. "The beer's cold, if that's what you mean," I replied, not acknowledging his cheeky compliment. He laughed, and it was genuine. It made me smile despite myself. "I'll take one then and whatever you recommend for yourself. Make it 2, he added. As I poured the drinks, I noticed how he watched me, not in a creepy way, but like he was genuinely interested in what I was doing. "So, you come here often?" I joked as I handed him the beers. "First time, actually. My friend said this place has the best service in town." "Looks like they were right," Daniel said, his eyes not leaving mine. We chatted more than I usually did with customers. He told me about his college days, all impressive and full of big words I didn't bother to remember. I told him about growing up here in town, how I always thought I'd do something more, but never figured out what that more was. "You're interesting, Linda," he said suddenly. "Not like the usual crowd in here." I raised an eyebrow. "Thanks, I guess. You're not too bad yourself for a rich boy." He laughed again, a sound that filled the space around us. "Rich boy, huh? Trust me, having money isn't all it's cracked up to be." We were interrupted by his friends, who were ready to head to some club. He stood up, tossed a 50 on the bar, way too much for 2 beers, and winked. "Maybe I'll find the right company if I come back here." And just like that, he was gone, disappearing into the crowd with his friends. But something about him lingered, like the echo of his laugh, making me wonder if I'd see him again. Daniel started showing up at the bar every night after that first encounter. At first, I thought he was just another guy passing time with a beer and small talk. But then the conversations got longer and more personal. He'd settle into his usual spot, and as I wiped down the counter or restocked the shelves, he'd share bits and pieces about his life and family. "My dad's pretty big in politics," he'd say with a casual shrug, like he was talking about the weather, not mentioning that his father was one of the state's top politicians. "And Mom, well, she's a housewife, keeps everything running smoothly at home." The more we talked, the more I saw past the polished exterior. Sure, he had money and a name that opened doors, but there was something else, something real that I couldn't quite grasp. Despite my better judgment, I found myself eagerly anticipating those evenings when he'd show up. One night, everything changed. He came in looking serious, his usual smile absent. "I've been thinking," he started, hesitating. "How about we go out tomorrow, somewhere nice, not just here?" It was sudden but not unwelcome. "Like a date?" I asked, trying to sound cool, though my heart thumped a little harder. "Yeah, a date," he confirmed, his smile returning as if he'd won some sort of victory seeing my reaction. That date led to another and another. Before I knew it, we were seeing each other every day. Daniel talked about his life, and I shared mine. He'd laugh off the differences, saying, "Wealth's my only drawback, you know." But it wasn't just his wealth. Daniel loved the high life, parties, late nights, the kind of leisure I could hardly imagine. He brushed off my concerns with a wave. "Things will change, Linda. You'll see." Then came the night he wanted me to meet his parents. I was a bundle of nerves. We drove up to their mansion, the kind of place you see in movies with sprawling gardens and more rooms than you'd know what to do with. His mother, Mrs. Patricia Gilmore, was as chilly as the marble floors, sizing me up like I was something she'd found stuck to her shoe. "A waitress?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Really, Daniel? You expect her to fit into our world?" His father, Gerald Gilmore, however, beamed at me as if I was the first honest thing he'd seen in years. "Linda, dear, it's refreshing to see someone from real life. You're just what we need, a bridge to the common man right before the elections." I didn't know whether to be flattered or offended. The dinner was tense, Mrs. Gilmore sniping comments under her breath, Mr. Gilmore countering with grand declarations about my refreshing simplicity. At one point, Mrs. Gilmore had enough, standing up so fast her chair almost toppled over. "I will not stand for this," she hissed, storming out of the room. Mr. Gilmore just winked at me across the table. "Don't you worry, Linda. Everything will be just fine." That wink was supposed to reassure me, but it felt like I was being swept into a game I didn't know how to play. Weeks later, Daniel got down on one knee right there in the bar where we first met, sporting the same cheeky grin he had that first night. "Marry me, Linda, and let's show them all how it's done," he said. Caught up in the moment and in him, I said yes. The wedding was anything but the quiet affair I'd hoped for. From the moment Daniel proposed, his father took over the whole show, insisting on a grand ceremony that would be talked about far and wide. "It'll be perfect for the campaign," he'd say, with a slight grin every time I suggested keeping things small. So there I was, standing in a dress fancier than anything I'd ever owned, cameras flashing in my face. As I tried to keep my smile from faltering, reporters swarmed around us, and Mr. Gilmore relished every moment, playing the gracious father-in-law to perfection. "See, folks, this is what real love looks like. Unity across different worlds," he announced to the cameras, slinging his arm around me a little too tightly. I glanced over at my parents, sitting off to the side, their expressions a mix of awe and discomfort. They weren't used to this kind of spectacle, and frankly, neither was I. Mrs. Gilmore, decked out in a dress that probably cost more than my dad's car, pasted on a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. During a photo op, she leaned in, whispering through clenched teeth, "Smile, Linda. Today we're all family." After the spectacle, Daniel and I moved into a luxury apartment, a stark contrast to my modest childhood home. It was a wedding gift from his parents, lavish and sprawling, located in one of the city's most exclusive buildings. Daniel's nights out with his friends became more frequent, and I found myself alone in our expansive living space more often than not. Mrs. Gilmore took it upon herself to drop by unannounced, always with a critique ready at her lips. One afternoon, she found me trying to straighten up the mess from one of Daniel's late-night gatherings. She surveyed the room with a disdainful eye before fixing her gaze on me. "Linda, this isn't some roadside diner. You need to keep a better eye on Daniel. Look at him. He's out all the time drinking. It's your job to rein him in." I bristled at her words, my hands clenching the dishcloth tighter. "And what exactly do you suggest I do, Mrs. Gilmore? Chain him to a chair?" Her lips thinned into a line. "Don't be smart, Linda. You need to take control. Otherwise, you're just as much to blame." The air was tense between us. The only sounds, the soft tick of the expensive clock on the wall and the distant hum of city life outside the windows. That night, when Daniel came home, I tried to talk to him about it. "Your mom thinks I'm not doing enough to keep you in line," I said, trying to keep my voice even. Daniel's reaction was immediate and heated. "Are you going to listen to her? Let's not let her get between us, okay? I love you, Linda. We'll figure this out together." But as the weeks rolled on, nothing changed. Daniel's assurances felt more and more hollow, and I found myself questioning whether love was enough to bridge the chasm that seemed to be widening between us. Living the high life wasn't all it was cracked up to be, not by a long shot. I found myself constantly tidying our massive apartment, cooking meals that often went cold before Daniel got home, and shuttling laundry to and from the cleaners, all while holding down shifts at Joe's bar. Meanwhile, Daniel, with no job on his horizon, seemed content to blow through his hefty allowance on nights out with his friends. Daniel's mother, the queen of high society gossip, made sure everyone knew her twisted version of our life. According to her, I was the villain, a dumb, greedy woman who led her poor son astray with my low-class ways. It was a normal day at the bar when she decided to bring her hunting friends for a casual lunch. The moment they strutted in, I knew I was in for it. They perched at the bar, their noses turned up like they smelled something foul. Mrs. Gilmore waved me over with a flick of her wrist, her voice loud enough to turn a few heads. "Linda, darling, could you hurry up? We don't have all day, and we expect proper service, even in this establishment," she said, her friends snickering beside her, their eyes scanning the bar with barely disguised contempt. I forced a smile, taking their orders while my hands itched to dump a tray of drinks right into their laps. "Make sure the glasses are clean, dear. We wouldn't want to catch anything," one of her cronies quipped, her laughter sharp as shattered glass. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, my tone syrupy sweet. I delivered their drinks and food with a smile plastered on, though inside I felt anything but cheerful. As I passed with another order, Mrs. Gilmore grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "You know, Linda, it's a shame you don't use your husband's money to better yourself. Maybe some classes in etiquette or a seminar on how to be a supportive wife," she said, her tone cutting. I gently pulled away, keeping my voice steady. "I appreciate the advice, Mrs. Gilmore. I'll give it all the consideration it deserves." The bar couldn't close fast enough that day. Each comment, each condescending look from that table added weight to the growing dread that this was my life now, scrutinized and scorned no matter how hard I tried. Back at our apartment, the silence was a stark contrast to the chaos at the bar. Daniel was out again, the note on the fridge a weak apology for missing dinner. I was left alone with my thoughts, which were as cluttered as the untouched plates on our dining table. Meanwhile, I started paying the bills from my own tips, because Daniel's idea of budgeting was seeing how quickly he could spend his money each month. Groceries, utilities, even the damn cable bill, I covered them all. His promises to get his act together and find a job were as empty as our conversations. The election season was in full swing, and Mr. Gilmore was more eager than ever to parade me around at every possible public event. He introduced me with great fanfare, always emphasizing how his son had married a simple girl from the people. At rallies, dinners, and interviews, I wore my smile like a mask, nodding and playing the part of the approachable daughter-in-law. But behind the smiles and the polite applause, I was weary. The constant scrutiny, the endless small talk with people who cared more about my story as a campaign tool than as a person. It was exhausting. More than once, I found myself on the verge of fleeing these events, longing to run out and never look back. One evening, after yet another fundraiser that had stretched on for hours, Mr. Gilmore pulled me aside, his hand gripping my shoulder a little too firmly. Linda, I need you to keep this up. You know your cooperation is crucial. Remember, your lifestyle, this apartment. It's all thanks to our support, he said, his tone as clear as glass. Of course, Mr. Gilmore, I replied, nodding. It wasn't just the campaign that was putting pressure on me. Things at home were no better. Daniel's behavior had escalated from neglect to outright destructiveness. He'd come home late, if he came home at all, often drunk and sometimes barely able to stand. Then came the night that changed everything. Daniel stumbled through the door well past midnight, his face ashen, eyes wild with panic. He collapsed onto the sofa, his hands shaking. Linda, I've screwed up, he blurted out, his voice a hoarse whisper. I owe money, a lot of money, to some really bad people. I lost it at the casino, and they're not the type to wait for their cash. My stomach twisted at his words. How much? 70,000, he murmured, looking away. I felt cold all over. $70,000? He nodded, miserable. I need your help, Linda. Please, I can't ask my parents. They'll disown me. The desperation in his eyes was something I couldn't ignore. He grabbed my hands, his grip tight. I swear, Linda, if you help me with this, I'll change. I know I've been a terrible husband, but I'll do anything to make this right. Something in me broke then. Despite the anger and disappointment, I couldn't let him face this alone. Okay, Daniel, I'll help you, but this is it. You have to turn things around, I said, my voice firm. I took out a loan the next day, $70,000, that felt like a noose around my neck. But as I handed the money over, Daniel was like a man reborn. He helped around the house, cut back on drinking, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I let myself believe that we could actually make this work. We spent evenings together discussing plans for the future, even daring to dream about starting a family. Daniel was attentive, assisting with chores and sharing meals at the same table, things we hadn't done in years. Maybe we should think about having a kid, he suggested one night as we cleaned up after dinner. I looked at him, surprised but not unhappy at the thought. Really? You think we're ready? He smiled, pulling me close. Yeah, I do. I mean, we're getting back on track, right? A fresh start. I wanted to believe him, to believe in us. In those moments, it was easy to imagine that everything could actually be okay, that the doubts and lies were behind us. But that illusion shattered the night I came home from a double shift at the bar. Tossing my keys on the counter, I headed for the bedroom, my body aching for just a few hours of sleep before doing it all over again. But the scene I walked into snapped me wide awake. Daniel was passed out on our bed, snoring loudly, with two girls I'd never seen before curled up beside him, both unconscious. Bottles and glasses littered the nightstand, the stench of alcohol heavy in the air. My heart hammered against my ribcage as a cold rage settled in my gut. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone and started recording. The camera's light cut through the darkness, capturing the damning scene. I nudged Daniel awake, my voice sharp. Daniel, who are these girls? He blinked up at me, confused and still drunk, then waved a dismissive hand as if brushing away the question. They're just my girlfriends, you know. It's not a big deal. We do this sometimes when you're at work. That was it. The final betrayal. I stopped the recording, my hands trembling with a cocktail of emotions. Rage, sorrow, disbelief. I stepped out of the room, dialed Mr. Gilmore, and waited for him to pick up. Linda, what's wrong? His voice was cautious, alert. Mr. Gilmore, I'm done. I just caught Daniel in our bed with two other women. I've recorded everything and I want a divorce, I said, each word measured, heavy with finality. He was at the apartment within the hour, his face a mask of controlled fury as he glanced at the still unconscious figures in my bed. Daniel had woken up by then, looking sheepish and scared, as his father berated him in hushed, vicious tones. "You idiot! Look what you've done." Turning to me, Mr. Gilmore's tone softened. "Linda, I'll handle this. Let's keep it quiet for everyone's sake. What do you need?" $500,000, the apartment sold and the money transferred to me, and the loan I took out for him cleared, I stated, each demand non-negotiable. Mr. Gilmore nodded slowly, calculating. "Done. But you must agree to keep this quiet, move away, start fresh somewhere else. Can you do that?" "Yes, I can," I said simply. There was nothing left for me here, no reason to stay. "And Linda, don't tell his mother. She'd make a scene, and we can't afford that now, not with the elections." The divorce papers came through quietly. I signed them in the dim light of dawn, alone. Mr. Gilmore kept his word. The money was in my account within days. The loan paid off. I was finally free from Daniel and his destructive whims. Settling into my new life in another city felt like breathing fresh air after being submerged underwater for too long. The day I moved into my new apartment in a peaceful neighborhood, I knew I had made the right decision. It was smaller than the luxurious prison I'd left behind, but it was all mine. The first thing I did after unpacking was block every number associated with my old life. Every ring was a potential drag back into that mess, and I wasn't about to let that happen. Then I went out and bought myself a car, not too fancy, but sleek and new, something just for me. A few days later, I landed a job as an administrator at a local restaurant. It was a step up from waiting tables with regular hours and no late nights. The owner, Carla, a wiry woman with a sharp tongue and a no-nonsense attitude, took me under her wing. "You new to town?" Carla asked on my first day, eyeing me with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Yeah, just moved in," I replied, keeping my past tucked away like folded boxes in my closet. Carla nodded approvingly at my concise answer. "Well, here's your desk and your responsibilities. You keep things running smooth and we'll get along just fine." "I appreciate it, Carla. I won't let you down," I promised, eager to prove my worth in this new role. The job was busy, filled with the usual chaos of restaurant life, but I thrived on the structure it brought to my days. I was making my own money, controlling my own fate. It felt good, honest, and real. Encouraged by Carla's blunt but fair management style, I decided to enroll in the local college. I wanted more than just to escape my past. I wanted to build something lasting. Night classes in business management seemed like the right path, and stepping into the classroom, I felt a surge of pride. I was doing this for me, no one else. One evening, as I was locking up the restaurant, Carla stopped by my desk. "Heard you're hitting the books at night. That's good. Keep that brain working." I smiled, grateful for her recognition. "Trying to. It's never too late to start fresh, right?" "Damn right," Carla said with a nod. "You ever need help, you let me know. I know a thing or two about keeping a business above water." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work, study, and the quiet solitude of my apartment. I relished the normalcy, the mundane moments that I used to take for granted. It was during one of these quiet nights, sitting on my balcony with a cup of tea, that I realized just how much I had changed. The city lights sparkled in the distance, each one a reminder of where I'd been and where I was heading. 2 years had slipped by since I cut all ties with my old life and started anew. I was sitting in my cozy living room, a book forgotten on my lap, when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and hesitating for a split second, I answered. "Linda, this is Patricia Gilmore," the voice came through, high-pitched and frantic. "Daniel is in trouble because of your negligence." I was taken aback. "Mrs. Gilmore, slow down. What are you talking about? What trouble?" "An unknown friend of Daniel's called me. He said Daniel got into a fight with a policeman in a bar. I had to transfer money to keep him out of jail. I took it from our savings, and Gerald doesn't know yet." "Why weren't you there for him?" Mrs. Gilmore's voice cracked with agitation. "Mrs. Gilmore, listen to me very carefully," I said, my voice calm and clear. "Daniel and I have been divorced for 2 years. I haven't seen or spoken to him since." There was a pause, and then, "Divorced? What are you talking about? Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because it was meant to be kept quiet for the family's sake, for the elections and all," I explained. "I'm sorry you were left out, but I am no longer part of Daniel's life or your family." "What happened to the policeman and Daniel?" Her voice cracked, confusion and fear seeping through. Laughing softly, I tried to find some humor in the absurdity of the situation. "Mrs. Gilmore, you've been scammed. There's no doubt about it. These scammers probably made up the whole story about the policeman just to trick you out of your money." There was a pause on the line as the realization sank in. Her voice quivered, fear replacing the anger from moments before. "Scammed? Oh no. What have I done?" The weight of her mistake crashed down. "Can't you just lend me some money to put back before Gerald finds out? Please, Linda." "Mrs. Gilmore, I can't. It's not my place anymore. I've moved on. You need to handle this with your family," I replied firmly, yet not unkind. Her crying intensified, then turned to anger. "You could help, but you choose not to. You're just as selfish as everyone said." I sighed, a deep, weary release. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I truly hope you sort this out, but I must go now." I hung up before she could reply, her sobs echoing in my ear even after the line went dead. Looking around my peaceful apartment, the stark contrast between my current life and the chaos of the past made me shudder. I picked up my phone again, this time navigating through the settings to block yet another number. As I set the phone down, a sense of finality washed over me. I was truly free now, no longer entangled in the web of deception and greed that had once defined my life.